Buonasera a tutti, grazie di essere venuti oggi. Parto con una comunicazione di servizio. Se qualcuno volesse venire più avanti, le prime file a destra e a sinistra ci sono dei posti vuoti, possono essere occupati, quindi venite avanti. Dopodiché passo la parola al mio collega Lorenzo Ciancarini che dirà qualche parola su questo ciclo di conferenze.
Allora, io sarò brevissimo e vi ringrazio anch'io di essere venuti, non ci aspettavamo così tante persone e ad un certo punto non ci aspettavamo nemmeno di poter iniziare questo ciclo e quindi ringraziamo semplicemente tutte le persone che ci hanno dato una mano, dal sostegno e la collaborazione e insomma che hanno creduto in questo progetto e che credono che possa andare avanti e che sia soprattutto un momento di crescita per il nostro corso di laurea. Lascio la parola al Prorettore PACI.
Sì, grazie e buonasera a tutti di nuovo. Sono particolarmente e personalmente orgoglioso di essere qua a porre i saluti dell'Ateneo di Pisa a questa iniziativa dei nostri studenti. È un'iniziativa importantissima proprio perché nasce dai nostri studenti del corso di laurea in Ingegneria e Architettura, un corso di laurea europeo, corso di laurea magistrale di 5 anni, quindi leggermente diverso dai corsi di laurea 3+2 tradizionali, ma è per noi un motivo di orgoglio avere questa tipologia di corso all'interno della nostra offerta formativa. Diciamo, seduto accanto a me è il professor LANINI, LUCA ormai, su cui abbiamo iniziato in quest'ultimo anno una collaborazione che io ritengo importante per l'edilizia dell'Ateneo, perché spesso come ufficio edilizia ci siamo concentrati sul mantenimento dell'esistente. Noi abbiamo come Ateneo un patrimonio importantissimo, circa 180 edifici concentrati nel cuore della città di Pisa che dobbiamo proteggere, valorizzare. Abbiamo un bilancio di circa, per dare un'idea, 25 milioni di euro l'anno, però questa conservazione, questo doveroso mantenimento e adattamento dell'esistente spesso fa passare in secondo piano le nuove realizzazioni, che pure sono importanti per quello che sarà l'università e per le nuove esigenze diverse che l'università ha. L'ultima realizzazione grossa che è stata fatta è il Polo Piagge. Qui siamo in un'altra di queste nuove realizzazioni, anche se ormai ha qualche anno, più di 20 anni quasi, e invece con Luca abbiamo cominciato a pensare forse a sognare un futuro diverso, anche in collaborazione, abbiamo iniziato una collaborazione con l'APQ, con la Biennale di Architettura di Pisa, anche per immaginare un'università che sarà da piccole cose, piccole che però sono importanti. Stiamo pensando a un nuovo padiglione studentesco nell'area di ingegneria. L'area di ingegneria soffre, come sapete bene, ma come so anch'io perché sono ingegnere anch'io, di mancanza di aree studio adeguate per i ragazzi e quindi insieme a Luca, insieme a voi, perché qualcuno di voi ha lavorato a questo progetto, abbiamo pensato a questo padiglione che speriamo di riuscire a concretizzare a breve. Questo è un nuovo padiglione moderno inserito in un ambiente diciamo di architettura storica e questo è un piccolo tentativo di portare avanti questo e mi piace che anche questo tentativo venga dagli studenti perché è importante per l'Ateneo che siano gli studenti a fare questa tipologia di attività. Per questo nuovamente ringrazio tutti gli organizzatori di questo e vi do nuovamente il mio benvenuto a questa serie di conferenze. Grazie.
Io sono qui in un ruolo istituzionale in quanto vicepresidente del corso di laurea in ingegneria dell'architettura, oltre che come docente dell'Università di Pisa, e quindi intendo ringraziare tutti coloro che si sono prodigati per la riuscita di questa iniziativa, quindi gli sponsor istituzionali, Marmi Carrara, Franco Umberto Marmi, il Rotary Club, il Forum Austriaco di Cultura, l'Istitut Français di Firenze, Dottor Plot, poi gli enti e le istituzioni che ci hanno dato il loro patrocinio, la Regione Toscana, il Comune di Pisa, il Destec, 120 grammi, e coloro che hanno invece collaborato come Live Green, LP, la Federazione degli Architetti. Ok. Ci sono poi, diciamo, degli enti e delle persone a cui vanno un riconoscimento particolare, innanzitutto l'Università di Pisa che ci ospita, il Destec che ho ricordato che ha creduto fin da subito in questo progetto, il corso di laurea che io rappresento qui, le associazioni, tra cui LP, che fa un grande lavoro di promozione dell'architettura moderna in questa città, e il Comune di Pisa che da un anno a questa parte ha deciso di investire molte risorse ed energie nell'architettura. Ma soprattutto il grande merito, se noi siamo qui oggi insieme a Tony Fretton, è che ci sono degli studenti, e parlo soprattutto di Lorenzo Ciancarini e Brunello Favilla, oltre a tutti i loro amici e colleghi che hanno collaborato, che hanno ideato e organizzato, direi, against all odds, nonostante tutte le avversità, con grande dedizione e fatica questi incontri. Perché un ringraziamento non solo appunto per la grande fatica, ma perché questa iniziativa segna secondo me una nuova stagione di protagonismo degli studenti nella politica culturale della scuola di ingegneria, che va al di là, diciamo, delle mere rivendicazioni corporative. E mi fa chiaramente piacere che tutto ciò parta da un'affermazione che è spesso non molto popolare tra gli studenti di ingegneria, e cioè che esistono più punti di vista, spesso molto diversi, sul progetto di architettura, e che quindi insegnare e di conseguenza apprendere il progetto di architettura è un lavoro incessante che ha come fine il raggiungimento di una forma, ma che molto difficilmente dalla forma può partire. Dunque questo è un processo che diventa un lavoro inesausto, una ricerca paziente, come la chiamava Le Corbusier, un lavoro di regia, di mediazione tra vari specialismi, vari interessi, committenze, amministrazioni, diverse culture. I vostri colleghi, perché vedo moltissimi tra i miei studenti che hanno fatto il corso con me, quindi sono molto contento, i vostri colleghi che hanno organizzato questa serie di conferenze hanno deciso di raccontare alcuni di questi punti di vista, invitando architetti peraltro molto diversi tra di loro, Tony Fretton, Guillermo Vázquez Consuegra, Ricardo Baggordon, Dietmar Eberle, Dominique Perrault. Architetti che sono molto diversi per cultura, per formazione, per linguaggio, per relazione col processo progettuale. Diversità che raccontano la complessità dell'architettura contemporanea una volta che sono venute meno le grandi narrazioni unitarie, la classicità, il movimento moderno. Mi preme però anche sottolineare un'altra cosa, cioè la straordinaria domanda di architettura che proviene dalla città di Pisa. Una città che possiede alcuni dei più straordinari pezzi monumentali del mondo, a cui però vanno da contrappunto alcuni interventi contemporanei, spesso sorprendentemente anonimi e banali. Io credo poi che la centralità che l'amministrazione comunale ha deciso di assumere nei processi di rinnovamento della città, parlo di operazioni a cui hanno collaborato, come esempio la Biennale di Architettura, la nascita di associazioni come l'EP, Pisa Studium, le ricerche che svolgiamo sul territorio col Destec e con il corso di laurea, siano quelle che un tempo Mao Zedong avrebbe detto i 100 fiori della nuova primavera dell'architettura per questa città. Vi ringrazio quindi per essere qui, do la parola a Fabio Candido che introdurrà Tony Fretton. Grazie.
So, I'm very pleased to introduce the lecture of Tony Fretton. It is the opening lecture of Genesis project, and I think it is the best way to begin with. Tony Fretton is graduated from Architectural Association in 1972, and he founds Tony Fretton Architects 10 years later. Since 1998, Jim McKinney becomes a principal of the office. Tony Fretton is an active writer and lecturer, and he was professor, chair of architectural design and interiors at Technical University of Delft in Netherlands, visiting professor at EPFL in Lausanne, at the Eberle Institute in Amsterdam, and GSD Harvard from 2004-2005. Now he is a professor at Chess University in London. And personally, I discovered, as I told him, the work of Tony Fretton in 2001, after the publishing of Red House, which Robert Maxwell wisely compares to some Palladian villas and Casa Malaparte by Adalberto Libera. Actually, Tony Fretton's work became renowned following the Lisson Gallery in 1992. Since then, the office works with many arts-related designs. Just to mention a few: Artsway in Hampshire, Camden Arts Centre in London, Fuglsang Museum in Denmark. And besides the uninterrupted theme of the house, approached a small and big scale as well, where you can find the aforementioned Red House and Anish Kapoor's house, the Vassar Road housing in Great Britain, and a residential complex in Tietgens Rund in Copenhagen, and finally several residential buildings in Holland. We can also mention different buildings typologies, like the British Embassy in Poland and Erste Bank headquarters in Vienna. Currently, the office is completing the Sky Towers in Antwerp, in Belgium. I personally think that the understated work of Tony Fretton is a matter of context and subtle relation with the surroundings. And I think that many of us could easily agree. It is not a case that it is a recent works monograph published by Birkhauser Verlag is titled Buildings and Their Territories. I would like to close this short presentation of Tony Fretton quoting some words given by the architect after a conversation with Elena Carlini. Tony said, "I create places for whom I assume the responsibility as a designer. I create them from other spaces that I experienced. These places can be public, formalized places, natural environments in which people feel a relation with wild world or plant kingdom, interiors whom communicate clear messages of social rights, or simply rooms of which people appropriated. I work on these materials without a unique conclusion, trying to obtain a calculate ambiguity, hoping that what I'm doing remains open to a physical and creative occupation by people. I want to create places of different character, bounded to proper aspects, uses and social function that combines in a wider collective identity. Today, more than ever, we human beings, we need to recognize reciprocity while we are maintaining the possibility to enjoy our differences. I'm looking for a relation between an intelligent and well-constructed rule and a place for a freedom of speech that it permits." Now it's up to Tony.
I have to talk in English, since I don't speak Italian. How many people here understand English? Good. Let's talk about Europe. If we forget my crazy country that decides that it might want to leave Europe in 2 weeks' time, if we forget the awful politics and the lack of leadership in Europe, if we forget the migration crisis, underneath all of that is a project. And that project is the formation of a European culture consisting of individual states that will not change. You will stay being Italian, and I will stay being British. But together, in a conversation like this, we will build below government level, below official level, below the level that people can interfere. We can build a conversation and a culture of architecture. And I have seen that over the last 20 years. My Flemish friends and I have this conversation. My Dutch friends and I have this conversation. So what I hope to do is to bring a small amount of Anglo-Saxon sensibility to a conversation about what architecture might be. The second thing to say is that in the introduction there was a comment about building in Pisa. And by chance, many of the buildings that I will show you are in historical situations, historical locations. Sometimes they're in unimportant locations, but in every case, the work that I do talks to its surroundings. I was going to call this lecture Buildings in its Territory, but I didn't. The lecture will have lots of pictures. It will not be highly theoretical. I've had 30 years of American theory, and I'm really up to here with it. I'm finished with East Coast theory. Let's talk about architecture. Let's talk about what we do as designers, the achievements that we made. So the first project will be the Red House in London, and it's this house. And there's a very simple urban idea, and that idea is that in this street, which has houses that were built by different designers over a period of time, that by accident, this house is in front of that house. And what I designed aligns with this house, but it also aligns with that house. So I get a facade which is much more three-dimensional. And I'm interested in how, not just how buildings look straight on, but how they, when you move around them, how they appear and disappear, how they have rhyming relationships in their form with the buildings around them. And inside the house, you will see the curtains closing. How wonderful. You will see rather old-fashioned forms like the staircase. Thank you. And or a room at the back, which is the dining room, which is a little like me, Chandra. And what I want to say about that is that most contemporary architecture defines itself as modern by a very narrow range of forms and styles. I find that really uninteresting. Picasso said that if he liked apples and girls, excuse me for being sexist, he would put them in his paintings. He worked with whatever interested him, and I work with whatever interests me. You know, in the 1970s, I saw in Rome, I saw Italian Renaissance architecture for the first time, and I liked its informality in comparison with Northern European classicism, which is very strict. Italian classical architecture could adjust and be flexible. So I like that. I also like these. So does that make me a postmodern architect? I don't think it does. I'm going to argue that this building that I'm showing you is a modern building. If we think of architecture as the modern movement, not just within the boundaries of architecture, but as part of a wider artistic work, if we think of music, painting, and literature and modernism, we can see that Picasso was a great modernist, but he also used motifs from Velasquez. If we think of Stravinsky in The Rite of Spring, he used deeply traditional Russian melodies. If we think of James Joyce writing Ulysses, the whole structure of the book is a Greek myth. So in modernism, there was no fear of the past. And we could think of Le Corbusier, who also absorbed elements from the past. So it seems to me that to be a modernist architect means that you can use emotional and motive forms from the past. So that's the argument of this house. But let me talk about it as an experience. When you come into the entrance hall and you go to a back room, but you find this garden at the back. And one of my desires is to make London an exotic city. London, England, is a curious place because it produces great creative thinkers, but it's also a deeply conservative and philistinistic society. So as artists, we're always clinging onto a slippery slope that we're sliding down from. So that you have to constantly work to make London beautiful and exotic. So in this house, you come from the street, and very quickly you're in the space here at the back, which is a fabulous garden. The room that's really most interesting in this house is the piano nobile, as we say in English. Which, or maybe in Holland it would be the Bel Etage, which is the first floor. And it's a room with a comfortable scale. It's 9 meters by 13 meters by 6 meters high. And it's a room that has some grandeur because it has a painting collection of my client. But it's also comfortable. It's like a Dutch canal house. It has, yes, you can recognize that it has classical motifs. You can recognize almost that this ceiling, which is curved, is my absorbed version of Carlo Fontana, because I look at everything. But it is, what I want to say is that these motifs never fully are brought to a conclusion. They're maintained as open, so that I hope that allows other people to interpret my work in the way that they want. And at the back of that room, there's a balcony which overlooks the garden. You see here, that's the dining room that I mentioned. But let's look at this bay window on the front. It is a space where my client works. So the idea of this house is not a modernist idea where every room has a distinct function. It's much more like the Italian room, Italian historical house, where rooms are, the character of rooms are established by what you see from them, and then they invite use and reuse. And on the top floor, that's the bedroom space and the bathroom space are exotic. And the idea here is that you can come from the bedroom to this terrace, and there's no architecture. This all disappears. But you see the city, you rediscover the city that you've left. In Copenhagen, about 2 years ago, we made this building. And the location was very specific. This church and these buildings were the completion of a classical project that started in about 1750, and then almost immediately stopped because the kings of Denmark didn't have any money. And finally, in about 1890, it was finished by a developer who was allowed to, well, in exchange for finishing the church, which is wonderful, he was allowed to build this piazza of, let's say, Beaux-Arts classical apartments. But this site here, he could never buy. It was always empty. And eventually, we were asked to make a building on it, which was in the style of today, but which related all of the architecture around it together, which of course was a very large task. And I was interested, this model will show that I was interested in Beaux-Arts classicism. Beaux-Arts classicism made very, very great cities. It made Barcelona, Paris, any number of European cities. Some of them great, like Paris, some of them very reduced, like Barcelona. So as a style, it was very adaptable. So how could you get with that? How could you enjoy a style like that? Well, this building that we made uses the forms of. This is a pavilion on the end of arranged apartments, and our building is a pavilion. So this pavilion has three parts. Sorry, it's giving a lecture by itself. Our building has three parts. This roof in the original building was just for servants and storage. In our building, a penthouse, these balconies were just the flowers, whereas in our building, these balconies can be used. I started with the forms of Beaux-Arts classicism, and then it became a strange observation about how modernism had intervened, how the windows in the modernist building had to be big, and how this pilasters had to actually be structured. So this is on a good point. It's very strange. I mean, this is the facade facing the church, and you can see this part of the Beaux-Arts classical building. You can also see these buildings, which are could not be taken down. So, in making this very abstract, making a very abstract form of Beaux-Arts classicism, its constructivist qualities became clear. Just, I hope, in the same way as the constructivist qualities of this older building. And its shape became simple, just in the way that this the vernacular building became simple. But when we visited the square, what we saw was that these buildings were being used very informally. You would look in the windows, and sometimes there would be a dentist's office or a graphic designer studio. And the entrances would not always be in the classically correct place. And on the top of this building was there's a problem, somebody had built a temporary roof garden. Sorry, you're not hearing? This makes a huge difference. Shall I start again? Maybe not. Maybe I'll do this for the next time like that. So this, on the top of this house, somebody had built an informal roof garden, and so here we have loggias, which are like a roof garden. So I made a building which completed the square, but not in the original idea of the classical square, but in terms of what that square could become through people's interaction with it. And if you're in this apartment, if you really are in the city, you really do see these people looking at you. So it's not for everybody. It's a place where really urban people want to live. Now, as a convinced Republican, I was surprised to find that I was asked to make an embassy. So we did. We did make an embassy. And if you're naive when you start making an embassy, and you think that the Foreign Office, well, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will say, if you're making an embassy, it should say this about your country or that about your country. But it doesn't work that way. It works in a much better way, which is that governments choose architects that they think are interesting, and then let them make a design statement. And I thought, well, that's good, but it's very strange. What can this building really say? And often when I work, I find a pragmatic solution which has a poetic possibility. And in this building, the pragmatic necessities were two things. Firstly, that it faced absolutely south, so there was the problem of heat gain. And the second issue was that if you are from Britain, and if you have a government that decides that it's really clever to invade Iraq, you shouldn't be surprised if for 30 years people want to blow your embassies up. And so it has to be blast-proof as well. So how is that achieved? Well, it's a double facade. It's not a complicated facade. It's a double facade which in the winter you close, so it's like a thermos flask, and in the summer you open it and the air goes through and cools the interior. But inside that is a very serious glass-proof facade, which has got 4 centimeters thick blank glass, and you could blow it up. You stood very close, but you could fire a gun at it and it would go ah. So it says, what does it say? What does this building say? It says that it's about reflecting nature. It's a building that attempts to not be official. Its message is one of naturalness, and yet inside its message, it also has a message of strength and resilience against, let's say, negative forces that we find in the world. And on each side, there's a terrace. And this one is for people in the embassy who work in the embassy, so it's a place where they can go and sit. On the other side, there's a terrace for the ambassador to have private talks with friends of freedom like Saddam Hussein. And then inside the building, that's the facade we were looking at. In Poland, it gets very dark in the winter, so you have to have lots of daylight. So we have these interior gardens that also bring in light. And then there's an entrance. You need a formal entrance for visiting ambassadors, the Queen of England. And so it's a very simple building, but it's also rather complicated. And there you are. When the door opens, one part of England goes in one direction and the other part goes in another direction. That's a joke. And at night, it's not lit. It's lit just from inside, so it's rather romantic. But if you come by car, if you're an ambassador, you come through a secure gatehouse and you drive into this garage. But if you come to get a visa, you go through here. Now, if you apply for visas, in embassies, it's the most demoralizing experience. You stand with your papers in hand in the rain, and we could do better than that. So people coming for a visa walk here, and they can see all of the garden and all of the embassy, and then at the back is an entrance which is as dignified as the one at the front for people who come trying to get visas. And the back facade is a slightly different arrangement. It doesn't have glass on it, and it's an exercise in how you can make curtain walling have some character. And these are just to show you that even a simple building, a curtain wall, can have some magic. In Belgium, we have a number of projects in Belgium, and this one is in a town called Deinse, which is nowhere. It's like nowhere. Well, it's near Ghent, but we seem to win lots of jobs which are in nowhere, which is actually a rather interesting place to be. What's nowhere like? Well, Deinse has, as you come in across this bridge, there's a river, and then there's the church, and then this is the building that we're making. And it's a town hall. It's a town hall that has offices for functionaries there, and then a council chamber on the front. And these are visualizations. I'll show you some pictures of it in construction in a little while. But there's a big desire in Northern Europe, in new town halls, for visual transparency, for the council chamber, for politicians to be seen by the public as they work. So this is a transparent chamber. I'll show you more details in a minute. And then this is the office. And both of them have a loggia on the front, which means that we can make it a low energy building because we keep the sun off it. So it has very minimal energy, it has opening windows. And this is what it looks like inside when you come in. That's the cafe for the people who work in the embassy, and you can see that they look out over the town that they administer. And that's the council chamber. So when you're sitting in here, you're in the town that you administer, and you're visible from the town that you administer. And then the working spaces are very simple. They have concrete ceilings, opening windows, lights, not light. So it's a very simple scheme. And these are construction photographs of what it is beginning to look like. It will be finished in a month. It's a mixture of concrete, stone, and aluminium, which are all similar in colour but slightly different in materiality. In Denmark, again, we made this building. It's an art museum in the south, about 2.5 hours south of Copenhagen. And it's nowhere. It's in a place called Frusang, which means bird song, and it's in Lolland, which has economic problems because its sugar industry is failing. And so this building is a way of bringing tourists to the area. It also is a place where the local collection of paintings, which are from 1770 to 1970, by Danish artists in all the European styles, can be housed. And they're very proud of this collection in Frusang. This is the location before the building was built, and it's very typical of Denmark. It's gravel. There's a beautiful agricultural building, and then at the back there's a manor house, where they have concerts. And then they have rooms where you can stay, because people come to walk in the landscape, which is beautiful, very, very flat, incredibly flat, and it goes out to the sea through a nature reserve. So it's a unique location. You come to it by car, it takes maybe 2 hours, you drive through this flat landscape, finally you arrive, and you arrive to see the landscape. Our building is on one side. It has 3 roof lights, central roof lights, and when you walk up close to it, that view is taken away and you see this, and then you go into the building and there's a cafe, and then at the back of the cafe is a view of another part of the land. And so there's a sequence here. You come in and you see this beautiful landscape. It's taken away from you. It's given back to you. It's taken away from you. It's given back to you. So in the museum spaces, right at the end, you see a small view of that landscape again. And you have a number of different types of spaces. This is a very adaptable, minimal gallery space which has control of daylight, so it can be dark. And then at the other end, there's another type of space, because the collection, this one's part of the collection which is pointillist. So each of the rooms has a different character, and then across the corridor are these rooms, which are for God frame paintings from the Golden Age. This is the ceiling which we designed, which is a decorated ceiling that absorbs the electric light. And then this is one of those turned central lights which brings daylight into the space, and it drops light onto the floor, but it doesn't light the walls. The walls are lit by electric light, so you can keep low levels of light on the paintings, but the room can seem as if it's daylit, because daylight gradually changes and affects your eye, and it makes it look as though the room is alive. And at the end of that corridor is a room for sculpture, which, because it is not light sensitive, can have another view. And then you leave that room and go back into the corridor, and you see a room at the end, which the client asked us to make, which is very beautiful. It's a room entirely given over to looking at the landscape. And that room is there, that's a sculpture room. And what I want to show with these slides is that this very abstract building notices that vernacular buildings are very abstract. It's also proved that a very abstract building can work with nature. It can work with the setting, be harmonious. It can also talk to these buildings around it. So there's a conversation between the building and its surroundings. In London, near the Tower of London, we've made this restaurant. It's very small, and it's attached to Tower Bridge. Now, this riverside is it's a huge tourist area, and there are 2 types of buildings on that tourist area. For the tourists, there's one which is the entrance where you buy your tickets, and that building is in the high-tech style, and it says, "I have nothing to do with the Tower of London whatsoever. I'm completely independent." And then there's another type of building which is a sort of innocent wooden building which says, "I'm invisible. I'm just a garden shed. I don't exist." And neither of these are approaches that we wanted to make. Being an enormous egotist, I wanted to make a building, even a small building, which spoke to the Tower of London. Actually was composed in relation to the Tower of London. So how did I do that? Well, this building is made of wood, and it's painted about the same colour as the stone in the Tower of London. And this is one of these upside down. You know, and it's in 3 parts, and this is like a building that might have existed on this water edge when it made boats, but it's also it's broken into pieces, so when you walk past it, it has some, you know, it has some movement in it. But it's also romantic. It's the only place in the on the river edge where you can sit and look at the Tower Bridge. But you can also look at the Tower of London. And from this point of view, it's slightly bigger than Lorenzo Piano's Shard, you know, from this perspective. And on the terrace, this metalwork has a relationship with the bridge in a distant, abstract way. So it attempts to be contextual, but it attempts to be contextual in its own terms. Now we do buildings in England, and here's some housing that we're doing that we've made recently in the countryside. So it's suburban housing, and this model will show you what it's like. It has towers and then long buildings like that. It's very small, it only has a small number of buildings, and then at the end is a single-story building. And down here is a terrific view, great view, and over here is an existing group of houses. So this is what it looks like. It's that's the single-story part. This is somebody who lives there who's added to the building, added their part to the building. You know, this is a balcony that looks out over the view. That tower has a room in it which can be for a guest or a studio. And at the end there's a small dwelling. And then you look out and you see your neighbours. So it has a community feeling to it. In Amsterdam, there's a much more serious building, which is this one. And it's a building of lofts where the people that rent it actually make their own interiors. And it's part of an urban development in Amsterdam West. And the urban design required 2 buildings with a space between them, with a glass screen. And I was fascinated by buildings in Chicago from the turn of the 20th century. Their plainness and solidity. This is a brick and stone building which has details which, the more you look at them, the more sense they make. But also they have character. You know, this is lower because across the street there's housing which is this high, so it gives some scalar relationship. And let's look inside. So to come in, you walk along here and you go into your apartment, and then it's very interesting to start simply as a designer. You shouldn't be afraid of beginning simply, because all buildings, as you design them, become more and more complex. So in this simple building, the moment that you go from the ground floor to the first floor has excitement. Or when you stand next to this large form that holds the glass up, there's a view of Amsterdam. Or in the penthouse, it reflects the sky. So complexity comes just through the development of the architectural needs. And it's a community. In a very Dutch way, there are no curtains, and people enjoy the view of each other's buildings. And then the insides of those buildings, in some cases, the occupants have made rather beautiful conventional apartments, and then others have made more interesting apartments. This is a bed that can remove and become a disco, which is owned by 2 young boys. And then there's a Polish dentist, and then Carol, the hairdresser. So it's funny. It's a funny and amusing, very Dutch place. You know, working in Holland's really great because the Dutch are very adventurous. They really don't care. They'll live in anything. It's a very stimulating environment in which to work. But again, like the building in Copenhagen, it's an urban building. When you're in it, you're in the city, and the building is part of the city. In Belgium, we're making 2 apartment towers over here. This is the view of Antwerp from the developer's office window. And this building is a museum made by the Dutch practice Neutling Riedijk. And this is how we found the site when we were asked to participate. It has the museum there, and then 2 towers by the Swiss architect Roger Diener. And then here and here were to be 2 towers by David Chipperfield and 2 towers by us. And this is what it looks like. And the story is that the project was started by a very interesting, young and sophisticated developer. And in the middle of it, he had to sell it. And these 3 buildings were bought by a much tougher developer. So the budget was high here, and then it dropped here. And then when it got to us, it went bomb like that. And we had a very low budget. We had the most predominant position and the lowest budget. And David Chipperfield was designing in white concrete. And we said to the developer, we'd like to design in white concrete. And the developer said, well, you can't. And we said, so what should we design? And we said, brick. So we had to design in brick. And what do you do with brick? Well, a tower is a very interesting thing to design, especially if you don't have the repertoire that Mies van der Rohe had in the Seagram building, if you have a very simple range of materials and windows. So for us, my decision was that we would make one tower which had a horizontal emphasis, the other one which had a vertical emphasis. And one would be red brick and the other would be yellow brick. And how would you get that emphasis? Well, essentially you make 2 buildings which are the same, and then on this one you project bricks that way. On this one you project them that way. And then you let things happen, you let this kind of thing happen. So instead of it being absolutely uniform, it's full of pragmatic decisions which have poetic consequence. And this is an illustration from the real estate agent of our project. And these are illustrations from the real estate agent's brochure of what the interiors would be like. And this is what it's actually like. This is it being built. It's nearly finished. And the one decision that was crucial was to make the corners open because the views are terrific. And so this is like a room, rather than it being a projecting balcony where you're out in the space, it's an outdoor space into which you can look at the river. And then the other one has a vertical emphasis. At the top, this will have a crown, a illuminated crown. This is a mock-up of it as it's been built. So you can see that it's going to talk to these surroundings. And this is a photograph, this is a photograph by a Flemish photographer of the building finished, which looks like a rendering. Well, we only employ older photographers who take real photographs, but this one was an experiment. This is very strange to see your building look like it's made of cardboard, but this is what it looks like. So it's like the Red House. It's a very simple form, which you hope has some consequences in how it looks in the city. And this is the project being struck by lightning, just to amuse you, I hope. It didn't amuse you. Okay, next project. We just won a competition in Switzerland, in another place which is nowhere. But it's nowhere. It's a place called Neuhausen. And the important part is Rheinfall, which is that this building has a waterfall, fantastic waterfall, and the building looks out onto it. So the developer's very excited by this. But the location is very peculiar. It's in place of these buildings. And there's a factory next to it. It's very Swiss. You discover that Swiss cities don't really have formal planning. They're very uncoordinate. And there's this building which has to, you have to keep its view to the south. So this is a sketch which I think won the competition for us. So we said that if we made an apartment building which had a form like that, it would talk to that and it would allow this block to keep its view. And so this is what it's like. If you work in series. If you work in towers, you do a motif until you've worn it out and then you do something else. So this is also vertical and horizontal, but it's two buildings joined together, and it has this part where it takes the vocabulary of these two buildings and it turns it into a little house, which looks at this little house here. And it looks out into a square, and this guy has a view, and these have a view over the waterfall. These apartments have a view to the square. This one has a view to the waterfall. And then there's a cafe. And that's the plan, first plan. There's three apartments looking to the waterfall and three looking out to the square. In fact, but from these balconies you can still see the waterfall. And the facades are a sort of small vocabulary that's made to do different things. On the back it's just windows in the wall. And on the side facing the waterfall it's reflective. It's highly reflective, so that from a distance, which is a very important view, it disappears. It's not a dominant building on the horizon. And this project, I think it might be the last project, it's a language school in London. It's here. And this is in a powerfully historic setting of late Georgian houses. That's the building. But it's also part of an existing school, which is in Victorian Gothic. And so this building is an experiment in Gothicism. In the same way as the building in Copenhagen was an experiment with the Beaux-Arts, this is an experiment with Gothic architecture. And Gothic architecture in the 19th century absorbed two things. It absorbed new technology, metal, but it also absorbed different styles. So on the street side it looks like that, and on the reverse side it looks like this. So it's two styles combined, which is very Victorian. And from the street it's transparent, because this yard where the language students hang out makes the street rather lovely. I mean, it's an accident. Originally there was a building here that was knocked down. But this garden is valuable to the street. So we preserved the view through into it. And at night you can see that it's would be enlivening to the street. But this combination of forms produces a rather amusing space, because these language students who are 15 and 16 years old, they're not serious language students, they're children. So it's a playful building, but it's a building where it accepts that, as Jean Nouvel said, all cities are a series of modernities. All cities consist of buildings of their time. And the question is how you can make them relate to each other, respect each other, and how you can make the city continue to be whole. Thank you.
Okay. So I think that we can start with some questions if someone has. I'll start. I have a micro. I was thinking about one thing. In Paris, there was an exhibition at Cité de l'Architecture, which was called Athens and Its Windows, by a Greek artist, Jan Andreadis. And it was a participating project in which inhabitants of Athens were called to take a picture from their window, off their window, from the inside. So you found out intimate views of the city. It was like if you were looking into the soul of Athens, because through the window you were seeing some particular views. So I thought about that because it's like the genesis of your project, of some of your projects, starts from the inside, and then they try firmly to get out and to communicate with the outside. So we have this relationship, and this relationship is mostly generated by facades through the windows. So I think that the window is a very, very important element in your view of architecture. And so maybe my question is it your architecture, an architecture of relations and not of representation? Allora, la domanda era la seguente. A Parigi, alcuni mesi fa, c'è stata una mostra alla Cité de l'Architecture che era chiamata Atene e le sue finestre, dell'artista Jan Andreadis. E ho pensato a questa mostra mentre ascoltavo questa conferenza perché era una mostra in cui avevano partecipato gli abitanti di Atene stessi, che erano stati chiamati a fare delle foto delle loro finestre dall'interno delle loro case, in cui si vedeva la finestra, il riquadro della finestra e una piccola parte della città, una sorta di vista proprio fugace. Ed era una mostra molto interessante perché lasciava proprio percepire un'essenza di Atene molto particolare. Era come guardare nell'anima della città. Quindi, appunto, quello che penso io è che l'architettura dell'architetto Tony Fretton è un'architettura in cui la genesi del progetto architettonico, in alcuni dei suoi progetti soprattutto, parte dall'interno, si sviluppa dall'interno, e poi cerca insistentemente di uscire fuori, di mettersi in connessione con l'esterno attraverso le facciate e le finestre. Quindi che la finestra diventa un elemento veramente di legame tra l'interno e l'esterno. E allora la mia domanda è se si può definire la sua un'architettura di relazioni, di interconnessione, piuttosto che di rappresentazione.
Yes. I hope I use everything, not just windows, but facades, interiors, relationships with the surroundings. But there's an ambition here, which is that is to communicate, to make an architecture which isn't about architecture. Well, it's always about architecture because I'm an architect, but actually to make work that communicates in the same way that a Hollywood film, a very good Hollywood film, both tells a story that's understandable but has an artistic content that means something. And so I use forms that have been used before. You know, I use a lot of repertoire that already exists in the world, and I reuse it. And I do that in the hope that people's emotional response, there will be an emotional response to it, a positive emotional response to the materials I'm reusing. And I think architecture has to operate, my architecture hopes to operate in a range between simple enjoyment and utility on one end and cultural comment on the other. So it's a big ambition. And if I think of Shakespeare, the English playwright, he does that. There's tremendous depth and yet great stories. And all great writers, and I don't mean abstruse and abstract writers, but great storytellers, can communicate something very deep about human experience through things that can be understood. So I'm against architecture which doesn't communicate. I'm against an architecture which is simply about itself. And I'm for an architecture which hopes to communicate with people while at the same time being properly architecturally artistic. Yeah?
Allora, come avete capito, ora si apre lo spazio per le domande. Vi invitiamo caldamente a farle. Fate sì che il problema della lingua non sia un problema, quindi potete porre la domanda in italiano e ci pensiamo noi a tradurla all'architetto. Voi dovete soltanto cogliere l'occasione di fare le domande direttamente a lui. Quindi chi vuole può venire qua al microfono, oppure glielo portiamo noi, visto che è mobile.
Ma maybe it's better, it's easier if I give the question in Italian and you translate to Tony Fretton in English, so
Okay,
we cannot lose time.
Otherwise the audience doesn't understand the question. Oh my. Where's my translation on? Oh, there you are. That's my translation.
Sì, la mia domanda si ricollega a questa domanda e risposta che sono state fatte poc'anzi ed è relazionata anche in qualche maniera all'immagine di quest'ultimo progetto, di questa scuola a Londra che stiamo guardando. Sembra di poter leggere nell'architettura di Fretton, ed è una cosa che anche Mark Cousins in un suo saggio sul lavoro di Tony Fretton ha sottolineato, che le sue architetture abbiano la capacità di assumere, di trasformare questo sistema di relazioni tra lo spazio architettonico e la città all'interno della forma costruita della stanza, della spazialità della stanza. È possibile dire che anche in questo caso, nel progetto della scuola di Londra, anche nel momento in cui l'esperimento è sulla spazialità gotica, quindi si presuppone in qualche maniera un'attenzione maggiore alla tettonica piuttosto che alla spazialità della stanza, e in qualche maniera ci sia la necessità di costruire una stanza che sia una stanza esterna, cioè l'idea della stanza, del rapporto tra spazio dell'abitare e città che si manifesta nella stanza, in alcuni casi viene portato all'esterno.
Well, I try to make the buildings that I design have some positive effect on the world around them, so that they don't just stop being themselves. In this building, the emphasis is on placing the activity of the school so that it's visible to people who are passing by. I mean, that quite often happens. In the Red House, sometimes you can see up into the windows, a bit like a Venetian palazzo. I always try to make relationships with the surroundings. In the towers in Antwerp, I can't do that because there isn't any context. So the hope is that these forms will be amusing, will be funny, engaging. Often in the way that Frank Gehry in his early work was funny, you know, in a humorous way, in a proper way, in a way that makes you not stupid, but makes you happy. That's, you know, Mies van der Rohe said, well, Aldo Rossi said about Mies van der Rohe that Mies van der Rohe understood towers as urban sculptures, which is very correct. Of course, that's what they are. But with Mies, of course, it's very profound. The Seagram building is a fabulous building, but I can't do that. I have to do something which is more ordinary, in a way, more appealing. So in many different ways, if the building has a close relationship with its surroundings, I do one thing, but if it's distant, like it, I have to do something else. But it always speaks to its surroundings. It attempts to speak to its surroundings. So this is also part of a sort of response to what I found in Holland when I worked there, which was that in the 90s, from the 90s, Dutch architects just made buildings without any sense of continuity. You know, they made extravagant buildings which were just one-off single pieces of architecture. And I think you can do more than that. First of all, I don't think you have to make extravagant statements. If you're prepared to be quiet and anonymous as an architect, which I am, as a kind of anti-celebrity, then you can do a lot more. You can make buildings that appeal at very simple levels, you know, just at pleasure. And you can make a building which keeps joining the city together. In London right now, in the centre, we have a problem with towers being built. And Foster's office, for example, which is a very great office, are making towers which could be in Southeast Asia. They could be anywhere. They have no awareness of the scale of the city streets of London. They'll collect a whole block together and then they'll turn it into one scale. And it's not wrong, but it is wrong. It means that the rest of the city is just seen as something that's waiting to be demolished or to be preserved. And you can do better than that. You can do what you have to do. You can make a big building, and you can make that building be friendly, and you can make it be part of the surroundings. You can make it constantly join the city up. And in Bruges, where I was, in Belgium at the weekend, it's full of buildings like that, of different styles, which have scalar relations. And I like very much something that Jean Nouvel, the French architect, said. He said, all cities are a series of modernities, which is great, but the modernities have to work hard with what exists and not ignore it. And that's what I try to do.
Hi. You've actually already addressed to the matter I'm going to ask you about, but you showed us many projects, very different from one another, both in scale and form.
I don't hear very well, so I can lean forward.
Shall I come forward?
That would be great. Otherwise, I won't understand. Don't I'll get the wrong answer.
I was saying, you have already addressed the matter, but I'm going to ask it anyway, so you can expand on it. You showed us many projects, very different between one another, both in scale and form and aesthetics. But I think that they were all characterized by a very strong dialogue between the surrounding areas, either urban or natural. And so we all know you're based in London, so my question for you might seem rhetorical, but it's not. Do you think that the ever-changing skyline in London, in the city, is characterized by this kind of dialogue you're trying to convey in your project, or not?
I think it's not.
I'm just going to translate in Italian.
Sorry? Okay.
Ho chiesto all'architetto se il dialogo che lui cerca di comunicare tra i propri edifici e l'area circostante, sia urbana che naturale, viene in qualche modo riproposta nella City di London, che è sottoposta ad un'urbanizzazione, a costruzioni sempre più preponderanti, e lo skyline è in continua evoluzione, e gli ho chiesto se appunto c'è un dialogo, una sorta di filo conduttore o meno.
I think in London, very good architects like Foster, when he's actually working on the project and when he makes the Gherkin, the Swiss rebuilding, it's great. I think it's beautiful, and if you look at the ground area, he's working in a horrible place and he makes something special. Or Rogers, who will make buildings which are completely different in style from the surroundings, but very consciously related to them. The problem in London is that there are a lot of very bad commercial architects who don't care about things like that, and they don't have the ability to care about that. They really only listen to their clients, and the city authorities don't know enough to stop them. So we've got a problem which most cities have, which is that we have a lot of bad architects operating. And in Chicago or New York, it can tolerate that because the grid structure gives coherence. There's a scale, and you can join a whole block up, you know, and it doesn't matter. And in fact, also the diversity of buildings, from spectacular ones like the Empire State Building, and then rather boring ones, and then Mies van der Rohe, work, because most cities are not made with great architecture. They're made with average architecture. But at the moment, the larger scale buildings that are being built in London are very badly designed, and they're just object buildings. I was going to say something. I was going to say that the Beaux-Arts classicism was very interesting because lots of different architects could use it, and there was great coherence. If you look at Paris or Barcelona, it's made by lots of different architects. And if you think of Barcelona, the Gaudi buildings, the Casa Miller and the Casa Batlló, they're like the buildings around them, but they're like a sort of Baroque version of it. So their extraordinariness doesn't take them away from being part of the city. But we've lost that for good reasons. You know, we've lost that. And commercial architecture, it doesn't care. You know, it really. In the end, we're talking about a political situation where money is said to be the most important thing. The economy's got to grow, and it's a colossal mistake. We're making a giant mistake, and London won't be interesting. Well, it will be more banal than it usually is. So it's a pity. So don't do it in Pisa. Don't build any high-rises in Pisa, ever.
Dunque, sappiamo, e abbiamo visto anche in parte durante questa conferenza, che il suo lavoro è stato spesso legato a committenze che appartengono al mondo dell'arte, alla sfera dell'arte in generale. E volevo sapere se la familiarità con questo mondo abbia in qualche modo influenzato i suoi progetti. E inoltre, sempre legato a questo argomento, volevo sapere se lei pensa che sia possibile individuare in qualche modo affinità proprio nel processo creativo tra l'architettura ed altre discipline.
But that's two questions really. The first one is let me put it this way. Your question is, do I have lots of clients who are artists? Actually, less and less. And most of my clients are quite ordinary. But you need a certain type of client who's will not interfere, will let you do what you can do. So I couldn't do this architecture in a highly commercial field because it wouldn't work. The second question, sorry, you do need a certain type of client who's tolerant at least. The second part of the question is, what is the similarity or difference between art and architecture? It was interesting. When I was working, I did a house for Anish Kapoor, the sculptor, and there was a moment where Anish said, we were doing a courtyard, and we did this courtyard inside the building, and he said, surely shouldn't that be an independent sculptural object? And I said, let me tell you the difference between art and architecture. And there was a kind of sharp intake of breath. You know, I'm a major artist and you're lecturing to me. And I said, art objects are seen for a very short time in quite an artificial setting, either in a gallery or in the case of Anish's sculpture in Chicago. They're positioned very carefully in relation to buildings. People look at them and they don't use them, and they only look at them for a short time. The difference with architecture is that people use it. And so architecture has to have the capacity to sometimes be an aesthetic object, but at other times it has to be capable of just being a background to people's lives. And Anish said, oh. And that was the end of that conversation. And I want to say that I want to completely dissociate architecture from art. It's not art. And the more, actually, to be absolutely honest, the more I see contemporary art, the more I dislike it, because it's about money and prestige. And architecture and photography are quite innocent and good. You know, they're concerned with human issues. And architecture is not an art form, it's architecture. It's a creative practice. You know, you invent things. It's not a scientific practice. But it's like object making or fashion or film. It's about talking to other people. And Adolf Loos understood it very well when he said the difference between art and architecture is that an artist can do whatever they want and please themselves, and an architect has to please somebody else. Now you could see that as a negative. You could see it as, you know, I'm the artist and I'm constrained by my client, but I don't see it that way. I think being implicated with your clients and being embedded in society is really interesting. To be a creative actor with lots of things going on that you have to deal with, that's much more interesting than art. And nobody can buy it, you know. Well, they can, but do you know the story about Sol LeWitt? Do you know the American artist Sol LeWitt? He made wall drawings because he got so sick of art being bought and then sold and sold. So if you bought a Sol LeWitt drawing, you got a photograph of a Sol LeWitt drawing, a certificate of ownership, and the address of 2 artists in your nearby town that would draw it on the wall for you. So they would draw it on the wall and you couldn't sell it because it was on your wall. And LeWitt was very interesting because his starting point was very simple, but what it produced was very beautiful. And there's a story that 2 artists in New York were drawing a Sol LeWitt drawing, which was very complicated. They had to connect points in a curve, and they made a mistake. And they'd drawn about 3/4 of the drawing, and they didn't know what to do. So they called Sol LeWitt, And he said, stand back and look at it. And they did. And he said, Solowit said, does it look like a silhouette? And they said, well, yes, it does. And he said, just carry on. Great. You know, an artist who was willing to accept human error. Architecture is much more interesting and much more complicated, much more difficult. But artists don't think that. They hate us. You know, having worked with artists for a long time, they hate architects. So I don't work for the art world anymore. I'm not interested. I just work for ordinary people. I make bits of cities, like Antwerp. Just ordinary buildings, you know, that don't have any art content. That's about as far away from the art world as I can get. Anyway, they don't ask me anymore because I'm too difficult. Because I've got views which are stronger than theirs. What can you do? Change course, which I did. Does that answer your question? Be proud of being an architect. It's a great practice.
Partendo dall'assunto che la creazione, l'invenzione si basa sull'elaborazione di concetti e frammenti che appartengono sia alla sfera tangibile che a quella intangibile della cultura nella quale ognuno di noi vive e è vissuto. Le volevo chiedere qual è il ruolo della memoria nella genesi dei suoi lavori?
This is a very complicated question that, with respect, I can't answer. I'm too simple, you know, I just make things. Memory, I was saying to Fabio earlier that there's been a long effect of theory writers on architecture through the American East Coast. And I think it's made us forget the real greatness of creative intelligence. Now, creative intelligence doesn't just exist in making architecture or making computers. It exists in us talking to each other, in two people who can't possibly know what goes on inside each other's heads, using conventional means creatively to communicate. That seems to me completely fascinating. So I love philosophy, but I actually like architecture more. And my PhD students at Delft write about the capacity of pure architectural practice to be a form of intelligence which is lost to theoreticians, but also, for example, in the design of hospitals, the creative input of architects is seen as not scientific. My PhD students are writing to prove that actually creative activities are very sophisticated and worthwhile activities. So I'm being a bit, you know, antagonistic to your proposition, but I'm doing that to say that thoughtful creative activity is really a great practice. And I mean thoughtful, not just I did it, but actually reflecting on why you did it, which is what I tried to do in this lecture. I tried to show some of the ideas that are in the work. You know, I made the work for curious reasons. And when I talk about it, it's afterwards. When I made it through a process that we all recognize. Anybody who's designed anything will recognize. When I give lectures or I write about it, I find the ideas in it that I think exist in it. So these explanations are after I made it. They only come into being because I made it. So I'm for creative activity and its intelligence. Yeah? Yeah.
Buonasera. Volevo chiedere una cosa molto più artigianale, volevo capire cioè, come si sviluppa il tuo lavoro, cioè, mi sembra di capire che lavori parecchio sulle facciate, quindi sui prospetti, o se invece magari lavori di più sulle piante, sulle sezioni, e anche come si sviluppa il lavoro nel tuo studio, come è organizzato, cioè se l'idea parte da te, arriva da altri, quali sono i contributi poi dello studio. Grazie.
The studio is organized with 4 partners. I make the designs. David makes the designs able to be built. Jim, my partner, makes money. I said to him once, when we were in the big recession, I said, how can you keep this practice working in a recession? He said, you, me, look at an architectural problem and you see possibilities there that nobody else sees. And he said about himself, I look at a balance sheet and I find possibilities. So I'm happy with him. And then there's Guy, my associate, who's young. And the office is very informal. I always wanted an office which was proper and comfortable and intelligent, so that people who worked there were part of an architectural conversation. How can you do that and make money? Well, it's interesting that Jim, my partner, said that when he was at School of Architecture, his teacher said, you can either be a commercial architecture and make money but no art, or you can be an art architect and make no money. And Jim said, but we're working with Anish Kapoor, who makes art and is a millionaire. So there must be a way, and that you can survive by careful management. So we run the office in a happy way. A lot of architects' offices treat people very badly, and I'm not going to do that. People work better if you're kind to them. You know, we have family-friendly policies, and you know, it's a Scandinavian office, and people work very hard because they want to. So that's how we organise the office. And what was the second part of the question? Do I start with the facade? It depends on the project. You know, sometimes because I'm now quite experienced, I can look at an architectural issue and I can see what I think is the most important part of it. Some projects, it might be the shape of it. Some it might be the plan. Some of it might be the facade. So I'll start in different places depending on how I sense the key elements of the project. You know, we're making a school in the country, and the neighboring people hate it. So we're making an incredibly low profile so that all their views across the site won't be altered. And of course that shapes the building. And then the students walk through inside the building. So suddenly the character of the building is given by things like this. So I'm quite analytical now. I used to be intuitive, and I'd look at a project for a long time and build it up by things, and then I wouldn't know what was happening. But now, if I get a project in the office, I'll give it to a job architect and I won't look at it. And I say, you analyze it, you tell me what you think. And it means that the job architect has, you know, they influence the project, and then I'll look at it and I'll say, if we do that, because I'm very experienced, I say, well, we can make all of that join it, and they go, you know. So I get them to chew the project up, you know. There's a story about James Sterling that I like very much, which is that, and it was told to me by an associate, so it's probably true, that when a project came into Sterling's office, they would make 3 teams, let's say, and one team would do a project in the style of David Chipperfield, another would do a project in the style of Karl Himmelblau, and somebody else would do projects in the style of Gino Valli, whatever. And then they would analyze them and they would say, well, the circulation in this one works well, but the form's horrible. The form's great in this one, but the circulation's horrible. And then they would jam all these together, and then they would give them to Sterling, and Sterling would go, and start drawing. You know, so they digested the project before the principal got involved. A long while ago, I was when I used to really lead the practice, and Jim, my partner, was just a job architect. We were doing a job, and I said, it would be really great if we could have all this roof be glass. And he said, there's no place to put the air conditioning in. And I said, there must be a place. And he said, this is the last job I'll ever kill myself putting air conditioning under the floor for you. So you have to let other people's intelligence work on the project. And you have, as a designer, you have to find the poetics in the pragmatics. It has to work, it has to be buildable, but it has to be special. So that's my job. My job is to make the magic, you know, but the rest of the people just make the buildings. So, I mean, often when a job's in construction, I'll have a questions and answers session with my associate who'll say, they want to do this, shall we do it? And I'll say, no, I think we can do it a different way. Or, you know, I'm always there in the job. And I draw a lot. I draw sketches for people that they... So it's very relaxed in a way. I don't have a lot to do in the office. It makes me feel idle. You know that there was I wonder if I can remember his name, an English architect who said he couldn't employ an assistant because the assistant might find him reading a newspaper instead of doing work. That's why I have a private office, so I can read my newspaper. Does that answer your question? Good.
So you've spoken about the importance of the very meaning of an architecture, but just to give an example, in the embassy you've spoken about resilience and strength and the connection with nature and with the environment, and you've also talked about pragmatic solutions with poetic consequences. But I was wondering, at the beginning of the creative process, when you at first take your pencil and just start drawing on a piece of paper, what do you think about? Where does your inspiration come from? And where do you practically start from? Because, I mean, for young students like me, the question, where do I start from, is one of the most scary and difficult to answer. In pratica gli ho chiesto, lui durante questa conferenza ha parlato molto del significato profondo di un'architettura e non soltanto quindi della forma, dell'aspetto, e per esempio nell'ambasciata ha nominato la forza e la resistenza e il rapporto con la natura, però mi chiedevo anche, oltre a il pragmatismo e la poesia eccetera, proprio quando comincia il processo creativo e quando prende in mano la matita e comincia a disegnare, da dove comincia, da dove vengono le ispirazioni e proprio qual è il punto di partenza, perché io penso che per giovani studenti come me e come ce ne sono tanti qui, la domanda proprio ma da dove inizio è una forse delle più, tra virgolette, spaventose ma anche delle più difficili da rispondere, ecco.
Well, because I've been doing architecture for a long time, I have ideas in my head. I'm always looking at buildings. I'm always looking at architecture. So the inspiration comes from a developing sense of the architecture that I want to make. But for you as a student, that's more complicated. But when I teach, I teach diploma students who have looked at architecture and thought about architecture for a long time. But the way that I teach is to let them understand that the only thing they can do is to put their ideas down on paper. And I say, I'll look at anything that you showed me, and I won't be strict about it. I'll show you its possibilities. And I'll look at it, and sometimes I'll say, you know, this is very similar to an Alvar Aalto building, and I'll show how Aalto relates to their work. Sometimes I'll show how a student's work has a history, you know, so that as a student you're not alone thinking things up. You've got architectural grandparents, you know, that help you. And there's a methodology. I have a student right now who's very charming, a girl student. She's very nervous, but she's very good. And she said, I can't really think creatively because I'm too analytical. And I said, well, just do anything, bring anything to me. I don't care what it is. And she did, and some of it was very interesting. And I said, which of these do you want to develop? And she knew which one she wanted to develop. And I said, see, you've got architectural judgment already, intuitive judgment already. So she developed it. And I said, now look at it analytically. Does it work? And she brought a plan, which was, everything was in the right place. And I said, if you move these things around and join these spaces up, it would be a more beautiful building. You know, I drew on it. And then she said, what do I do next? And I said, you draw the plan so it's got some freedom in it. And then you draw the facades. And in my studio, we always use three-dimensional drawings so you can look at the building in its context. And I said, then what you do is you print it and you put it on the wall away from everybody, and you just look at it and you don't think what you're looking at it for, and you draw, and it will tell you something. Of course, it's not the project telling you something, it's your mind telling you something. So I teach to develop the individual's capacity to think. Now that makes me uncritical, and I get criticized for not being critical enough. Well, I don't, because I've got some status. Nobody dares to criticize me, but you can feel them thinking that I'm not critical enough. But I don't care. I think it's somewhere in a school of architecture you need somebody who just teaches how you use your mind to design, you know. That's what I do. You start from anywhere. Start from anything that a student will put on paper, and then you show them its intelligence. And of course then they get confidence in their ability, and then they start to think like an architect. That's how I would do it. Yeah? Thank you.
Okay, and Martin Steeman wrote about your work. Tony Fretton has spoken at times of the fact that, once erected, a building has a presence that one could not have anticipated. You talked also the emotional side of the architecture of the building. Can we say that the emotional side relies on what we cannot anticipate when we make a design?
Of course. I mean, music.
Maybe I translate in Italian.
Yeah, designing in music or painting, you can make highly emotional work. I mean, it's often sentimental. and architecture is quite capable of being regarded emotionally. People look at Peter Zumthor's work and they feel a kind of religious quality, you know. So, I mean, there's a long history of buildings saying different things. In Notre Dame in Paris is a kind of fear machine, you know, where as a small person, your God is looking at you. But if you go to the mosques in Istanbul, they're very humanistic. They look out over the city, and people pray together in a large room. So, in a way, architecture can't. To make an emotional response, it needs something happening in it which is emotional, and the architecture can't do it. It needs a program which has an emotional content, I think. But yeah, I mean, architecture's theatrical as well. I mean, it can be highly theatrical, which so yeah, it's a very versatile medium. It's not as versatile as a poem or a piece of writing, which can really get into your mind, but it's not abstract by any means. Yeah?
D'accordo, grazie mille a tutti per essere venuti, spero sia stato molto bello. E dunque vi diamo l'appuntamento per il 15 di aprile, tra 2 settimane esatte, o sempre un venerdì, alle ore 15 al Polo Porta Nuova, aula 10, per l'incontro con Guillermo Vázquez Consuegra. Avrete comunque le comunicazioni tramite gli ordini, su Facebook, tramite newsletter, eccetera. Quindi grazie a tutti per essere venuti. Se volete, l'architetto, come abbiamo già detto, è a disposizione per parlare, per incontrarvi e salutarvi. Grazie.